All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Very nice to see you. Thank you for joining me on this Monday, the 25th of July. I am Jason Levine, aka Beetlejace. It is great to see you here on the Adobe channel here on Twitch. And we are back with the Audio 101 series. And today is part 12. 12. It's hard to believe we've gotten this far. We're just going to keep going. Hey, Neil, how are you? Hey, Legacy of Pi. Paulina, very nice to see you. Hello, CBR. Elsie Finch. Yeah, special guest, Jeff Goldblum, as evidenced by the fly right here. So we are starting today, actually, in Premiere Pro, as we're going to focus on working in 5.1 surround sound in both Premiere and Audition. Hey, Ihajo, hey, AIM IO6, and just kind of really show you the differences and talk a little bit about some of the best practices for really getting started with mixing in surround. Or I should say, really, for the most part, working with surround, automating, right? So that's a very big part of 5.1 mixing, is really just the concept and the idea of automating the mix. Basically creating a lot of keyframed movement for specific sounds on specific tracks to either navigate the front left speakers or in sort of 360 space, back to the rear speakers, having complete control over what goes to the LFE, also known as the low frequency effects, or all that sub information, and then also being able to control what goes discretely or not discretely to something like the center channel. Specifically, we are talking about 5.1, so you should know that Premiere Pro and Audition basically allow you to mix a 5.1, or I should say, to work in 5.1 as far as surround is concerned. Now, with Premiere, of course, you can have adaptive tracks, you can have adaptive multi-channel sequences that can have any number of actual physical channels. Actually, I think it's limited to about 32, but if someone said, well, can you mix in 7.1 in here or 10.2? Not technically, all right? If you're going to be spitting out something that's going to go to, say, leveraging something like Dolby Digital or even DTS, we make 5.1 here. Hopefully we'll see proper 7.1, 10.2, and all the rest coming soon. And the same goes for Audition as well. Now that speaks to also using some codecs as well. And one of the things that I'll talk about when we get to the end here is how to kind of get this stuff out, whether you deliver 6 channels worth of stems, which represent each of the already created channels, front, left, front, right surround, center, and sub, or do you create an interleaved 5.1 file, which is basically one wave file that contains all of those channels just kind of glommed together. So this is not unlike a lot of the things that you see with a lot of the cameras today that shoot 4, 6, 8 channels of audio. It's an interleaved file. Typically it's one, or oftentimes it's one file that has all 8 channels or 6 channels combined. All right. Hello, Cody Bear. Hey, Cody, nice to see you. Word up. All right, hold on. I just got to minimize my, what did I just do here? I lost my chat. Sorry. Now I'm picturing a picture. Okay, that's fine. Excellent. Singing a song to bed. Okay. Maybe a little later. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? So here we are inside of Premiere Pro, and again, if the idea is that we want to create a 5.1 surround mix for a project video that we're editing, you can do that. And of course, the process can begin by actually creating a new sequence. So here I already have an open sequence. This is actually the short trailer that Michael Shez and I created a few weeks back during one of the online creative jams. And basically I took what was originally stereo and nested it inside of a new 5.1 sequence to create a multi-channel sequence in Premiere Pro. If we go to the new item button down here at the bottom of your project panel, your multi-channel options will be set by sequence. So that's something important to note in Premiere. Something also important to note is that while we do allow you to make changes, for instance, to things like specific elements of the project I'm sorry, not here in project settings, under the sequence settings here, so you can change the frame size after the fact. You can change the time base or the editing mode. You'll notice that your audio channel format is basically locked down. So once you commit the sequence to a particular audio configuration, that's for the sequence. Now the project can have any number of different types of channel formatted sequences in it, which is why it's done at the sequence level, not at the project level. So if I wanted to make a new multi-channel sequence, hey Magenta X, let's go to Oreo Apple Crash. Thank you very much. Feel free just to listen, even if you don't cut in 5.1 surround. All right. Under new sequence, under tracks, so you'll see we've got our settings here and then tracks. Tracks is where you will determine the audio configuration. Now, this is a panel that a lot of people actually don't, or I should say they miss, they skip it by accident because it's like the third one in the chain, and it's just not sort of obvious. You think, oh, okay, I found the preset. Yep, I'm shooting DSLR, 1080p, 24, good. You may never even get to settings, and notice this is the same as the sequence settings that I just showed you in Premiere Pro. Again, notice the audio here just conforms to the sample rate and the display format, but it's tracks where you actually choose the channel configuration of the sequence that you're going to be working in. So because we want to do 5.1, you'll see that there is a specific 5.1 selection here. It is Monday. This will denote that the master fader is a 6-channel, but specifically for 5.1 mixing. And what that's going to do by selecting that, it's going to give you that multi-channel panner, the surround panner that you'll see inside of the track mixer. Now, having said that, you'll notice that we also have the multi-channel master. So you might think, oh, I'll go into multi-channel. That way I can mix in 7.1 or whatever I want. And then you can choose the maximum number of channels, and you'll see it goes all the way down to 32, okay? The difference with multi-channel is that, yes, this allows you to have a master fader with any number of channels and any kind of track configuration with different types of output assignments, and you can see you can set those in the routing matrix here. The difference is that this is not going to give you a surround panner because this is not a surround mixing environment. This is just a multi-channel mixing environment. Those two things are actually separate where Premiere Pro is concerned. So if you're wanting to do, if you've got 8 channels of audio coming from some kind of MXF camera format, but ultimately you're delivering stereo, you would still likely choose a multi-channel format, have 8 channels, because it's not uncommon, particularly in broadcast, and I talked about this with some of the new export options with Premiere using Media Encoder, that on export you want to route, stereo music to 1 and 2, dialogue and sound effects to 3 and 4, ambient sound to 5 and 6, and 7 and 8 you leave blank for, other things. So multi-channel in terms of the sequence property, very different from 5.1. And 5.1 is what you will want if you actually want to do surround, okay? Surround sound, the kind of thing that you'd be listening to and experiencing in the movie theater or your home theater. Okay, so you create your master as 5.1. It automatically will take 6 channels here. And then you could add any number of tracks, and you'll see that you have the variety of different tracks to choose from here. Generally, I'll choose standard, okay? With standard tracks, you can drop in mono or stereo. Premiere doesn't care. 5.1 track type is going to basically tell Premiere, this is looking for interleaved files. So a 5.1 track type is actually a track that expects one file that contains 6-channel audio in it. So sometimes you may use those. You can also add those after the fact, by the way. Adaptive will do just that. This is what you would use if you were probably going to something like, a 4, 6, 8, 10-channel sequence. So that'll conform to the number of channels supported by the native media itself. And the rest you get mono. Obviously, we could choose mono if we want. And then you've got submix tracks for stereo, 5.1, adaptive, and mono. I don't really see too much. I never really use any of these submix tracks in Premiere Pro. I suppose you can if you're doing a lot of submixing and grouping. It's a little bit clunkier on the Premiere side, and we've talked about that, and that's sort of one of the things that I'll show you here today too, and why you might possibly want to do your multi-channel mixing in Audition. Hey, Dave Edwards. Okay, so let's see. Okay, well, I'm looking up some of the other... Lord Bravespear, word up, what's up? Okay. All right, so let's get out of here. All right, so if I wanted to, again, I could choose standard for all of these. We could make a new sequence. All right, we could call this surround 3. Boom. And then if we were to have this surround sequence here, you'll know that it's a 6-channel 5.1 surround sequence for 2 reasons. One, because if you look at the master fader here at the bottom, you can actually see 6 little squares here, right, representing the 6 channels. But also, as mentioned, when you choose the 5.1 channel configuration for the sequence, then you get this multi-channel surround panner on each of your tracks. You will also notice that you do not have the standard left-right track panner, okay? You don't have that once you have these standard audio tracks inside of your 5.1 sequence, okay? All right, so let's go back here for a second. Let's twirl some of this up, go into our track mixer, and go into our surround session. Okay. All right, so here we have, again, the trailer that we created just a few weeks back. And inside the sequence here, got a whole bunch of audio. Now, as it turned out, we were using dynamic link between Premiere and Audition to go between these two things. So in the end, when we actually published it through Premiere Pro, I simply used the stereo final mix, and that's what we're actually seeing here. So this was actually sent directly from Audition via dynamic link back into Premiere Pro. However, if we were going to be creating the surround mix, right, having simply a stereo mix of everything, and by that I mean dialogue, ambient sound, sound effects, and music, there's not very much we can do just with the stereo file. Now, having said that, the last Audio 101 that I did, which was the sort of series review, and then I started to showcase a couple of hidden features, a couple little hidden gems in Audition. I talked to you about something called the frequency band splitter, and talked about reversioning and how to take mono or stereo and actually using frequency band splitter in conjunction with something called the center channel extractor to actually isolate individual sounds, instruments, voices, so that you can kind of simulate a 5.1 multi-channel environment even from a stereo master, okay? We're fortunate, though, that we have all of the stems of all of the original pieces of the audio mix. And if you just take a look down here, I'll zoom in for you. Sorry, I got off screen there. You can see, so this is like the camera audio. These are the kick drums that kind of pulsate the whole thing, and we'll listen to this in just a second. Couple tracks of screams. This was a horror trailer, by the way. The sound of the fly. Some tremolo strings. That was kind of the bulk of the music there. Cross-faded strings. We had some ascension going on there with the various string elements. A couple things that I forgot to label. Track 1, track 2. Some more kicks. The Foley, so the steps. I think this was all Foley stuff, actually, in these tracks here. The ambient sound. Okay, and then a combination of ambience. So we had ambience, storm, lightning sound effects, and all that other stuff. So because we have all of this separated, now we truly have the ability to create a dynamic, multi-channel, surrounded kind of sound experience. Now, I'm a big believer that really you don't need to have things moving all over the screen. Or let me rephrase that. You don't need to have things moving all over in sort of 5.1 space to get the point, you know. I mean, it was when surround was sort of, I don't want to say new because it's been around for a long time, but when it was kind of super in vogue 10, 15 years ago, when the home theater really started to pick up, you know, and it's always the kind of the classic, like the helicopter, and you've got the helicopter going from sort of the front right to the rear left, and you get that, you know, you kind of, and that's a car sound, but you know, you kind of get that, when you felt that thing kind of going from the front of your head to the back of your head, you know, initially you're like, oh, it's so cool. And that is cool. But not everything has to do that. And like many things, and we learned this, we talked about this last week during the Adobe Live takeover that we had with some of our amazing guests from Flern, Aaron Nace and Eric Kim Street Photography, and DJ Cutman as well. Less is more, right? So if you're going to have things kind of ping-ponging all over the place, when you have so much movement, it's like you have no movement, because then it's just chaos, So really, you're not mixing differently per se. It's just a question of subtle things, right? Subtly maybe have some lightning or some kind of explosion or articulation sort of towards the rears. And then occasionally maybe you have something go diagonally across the sound field. We still have discrete center for things like dialogue, and then we can have, say, the bleed or the ambience or the reverb of the dialogue echoing in the rears. But you want to kind of make those decisions as you're going through. Let's take a quick look at this. Again, many of you have seen this already, and we'll just play this back. This is Something's Happening. Created with Adobe stock footage, of course. And Michael Shez acting as Robert De Niro. Okay, so even as I look at that now, I'm trying to think, well, what do I need in terms of the surround, right? What do I even want to do, right? There's not a lot of dialogue. You've got this, something is happening. Okay, so there's like our center, right? And maybe the scene with the fly, that's sort of creepy and it's very in your face. So that's good sort of center channel. You'll also have that sort of in the left and right if you so desired. But we've got a lot of that ambient sound, and that's where we can sort of take advantage of the surround panning. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to move. We might just kind of leave it there and let it linger there, okay? What's up? Happy T Kid, nice to see you, okay? All right, so hey, Cranky Head. So now before we even get there, let's talk a little bit about configuration and preferences, okay? So we're gonna go into audio hardware preferences first. Now, this may seem obvious to you, but I'm not trying to make a joke of this when I say it. A lot of people have asked me in the past, do you actually need multi-channel output to create surround, right? Like, do I need a sound card that has 6 outputs so that I can monitor those 6 outputs when I'm creating the surround sound? And the answer to that is, well, I mean, the answer is yes, okay? If you need to be able to hear and monitor what you're doing. Now, will Premiere prevent you from creating it without having a multi-channel output? No, absolutely not. You can absolutely create whatever you want. You just won't know sonically what it's going to sound like until you actually play it back on a system that has 5.1. So while we allow you to do it, that is certainly not a best practice. 5.1 mixing, and in particular where you're working with all the elements that I described, so dialogue, sound effects, ambience, music, just like mixing in general, when you're dealing with stereo, just because you have more channels doesn't make it any less challenging. You still need to carve out space. You still need to scoop out frequencies to let certain things pass through. And more importantly, as I said, if you start having things moving all over the place all the time, your mix is going to be a big mess. So monitoring is very important. Now, for our purposes here, I've got my Focusrite Thunderbolt, which has no fewer, as you can see, than 20 outputs. And when you have a sound card or a sound device that has a minimum of 6, as you'll see here in the output mapping controls, Premiere Pro will automatically configure those in multi-channel surround for you. Now you can also move these around. So you can see here channel 1 is conforming to front left. That's that little puck in the upper left-hand corner of the square here. All right. Channel 2, front right. Channel 3, center. Channel 4, looks like a bass clef. It is, but that's supposed to represent sub or LFE. 5 is left surround. 6 is right surround. Okay. And there's different formats. Sometimes in certain systems you might see front left, front right, left surround, right surround, center, sub. This is the more standard channel configuration for 5.1. And also, I believe, conforms to the Dolby standard as well. But if you wanted to move these, it's as simple as just picking them up and replacing them wherever they need to go. Okay, so you can just click and drag and move these around. And this, by default, is just showing you kind of your default channel 1 and 2 stereo left and right outputs as well. Okay, so the first thing is output mapping, making sure you have the ability to monitor. Do you need all of the same monitors to do 5.1? Ultimately, no. Obviously, just for mixing, it makes sense to have speakers, at least the first 5 speakers, or I should say the first 4 speakers, front left, front right, left surround, right surround, to kind of be the same. They don't have to be. Oftentimes the center channel speaker is a little bit different, and of course the subwoofer is a little bit different. So the speakers don't have to all be the same, but you definitely want some consistency. If you've got 6 completely different speakers, that's just going to make mixing that much difficult. And they sell all kinds of kits where you have kind of the front, left, and rights, and then sometimes you get those rear surround satellites, which are often smaller. See, these things to me, for mixing, aren't the most ideal because they're not necessarily representative of how it's going to sound everywhere, which is again why you really kind of want studio monitors to create the most temperate sort of multi-channel mix. Again, it's very easy to overdo certain things, particularly if your monitoring isn't ideal or your monitoring situation, whether it's your studio or wherever you're doing it, isn't sort of perfectly treated for mixing audio. So you just want to be aware of those things. Again, not that you can't do it, not that you can't have great results, not that you can't have super big 5.1 mixes. It's just something to keep in mind. So this is just a little bit on the actual hardware configuration. Now, a couple things that I want to point out before we even get started, because this all relates to, again, automating the 5.1 mix, really making things move. This is a panel that you want to kind of set and not necessarily forget, but set it and just be aware of where the stuff is, and you probably won't have to go back here very often once you make some of these changes. Okay, now, curiously, they have this setting here, auto match time, all the way at the top. That feels like that should be down here towards automation, because that's what it's related to. But let's kind of go down these things in a row as we're looking at them here. So your 5.1 mixdown type, this is just a pretty standard setting here, front and rear. You see you can have front and rear and LFE, or the front and the LFE, or front only. Front and rear is the standard setting in Premiere Pro. That you may occasionally change. I'll generally leave that at the default. Some multi-channel outputs to mono and source monitor. Now this by default is checked. The benefit there is just so you can hear everything that's going on in the footage if you're not always monitoring in sort of 5.1. This does not have to be checked. I like it just because, again, if I'm just kind of doing a scrub in the source to bring footage in, that's fine. Play audio while scrubbing, we all get that. A lot of times I disable that because it can drive you a little nuts. Maintain pitch while shuttling. Again, if you're kind of trying to do the sort of tape-style scrubbing, uncheck this box. Unfortunately, this doesn't really simulate tape style so much as kind of a digital pitch shift, so I always use maintain pitch here. Mute input during timeline recording doesn't really apply to 5.1 mixing per se. Automatic audio waveform generation, that's fine. Now, the default audio tracks here, this is just the standard for the sequences. It's how the tracks are brought in. These I will generally keep as defaults. There's really, there's some cases where you want to, say, take 5.1 media and bring it in as mono files. So this would be an example of if you had interleaved files and you wanted to bring them into Premiere. Should the default audio property be to have it, in one file, in one track, or 6 files and 6 tracks? This is where you're going to set and make those changes. So this is a really good, this is a very important piece of this audio preferences panel here that you may have to revisit depending upon the kinds of footage that you're working with. Happy T Kid, can you stream 5.1 on Twitch? That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't really know. That's a good question. I don't know. I'm curious. I don't know that OBS or Wirecast support more than stereo output. Let's see. Do they? So I'm looking at I'm in OBS right now, and it only appears to allow me to choose mono or stereo. So that would determine what's going out to Twitch. Now that's just this software. I don't have Wirecast fired up, otherwise I'd check. But that would be actually on the broadcasting software side. So good question though. All right. Very cool. And yeah, great out of the box cue as well. Okay. Now, the last two things I'm going to point out here before we actually get to messing around with this stuff, and then we have to bounce into Audition, and we're already 26 minutes in. Time just flies. Automation, keyframe, optimization. Okay, now as I talked about, I'm going to show you how you automate in Premiere and then how you automate in Audition. This same setting, automation, keyframe, optimization, linear keyframe thinning, and minimal time interval thinning, both of these settings exist in both applications. And the reason is, what do these things mean? Well, again, the ability to automate, the ability to say, I want to take that sound effect and have it go, from here to here. Or I simply want to fade it up and fade it down. And I want Premiere Pro to capture my movements, capture my keyframes as I automate or create them live. When you do that, it creates keyframes, obviously, right? If you're going from minus 20 dB up to 0, as you move that fader, it's setting a keyframe for you all along, every step along the way. Do you want it to create keyframes every step along the way? That sounds like a lot of keyframes. And the answer to that is no, you really don't. Because it's just going to be a big mess, a big keyframe mess. You know, think about it. It's kind of not unlike in After Effects or even in Animate CC. You know, when you're kind of doing your tweens. You know, if you've got a character animating from here to here and he goes, you know, do you want 600 keyframes for the arc of the jump, or can you kind of do it 1, 2, 3, and you know the motion path kind of fills in the rest? Maybe you've got a total of 5 keyframes, right? Less is more. It's going to be easier to edit and automate later. So that's what this first by default checked checkbox relates to: linear keyframe thinning. Okay, if you don't have that checked, as you say increment from minus 12 to 0, it's going to put a lot of keyframes in there. Too many. And that's not going to be fun to edit manually afterwards. So this I highly recommend leaving this checked by default. Now the other very useful setting in terms of thinning out the number of keyframes that are generated when you're automating a mix is this one here, minimum time interval thinning. So right now, by default, if I turn this on, the minimum time for setting a keyframe is 20 milliseconds. Way too short. Again, you're going to end up with a ridiculous like snake of keyframes that if you simply use the faders and the what we refer to as the puck and dish here in the audio track mixer, that's fine. You're never really working with individual keyframes. But if you want to go down into the track level and start editing things, which can be a little more elegant, a little bit easier, if you've got this set to 20 milliseconds, there's just going to be a gazillion keyframes in there, i.e. not editable. So I will generally say the minimum time is, and it depends, it depends on the type of stuff you're doing. If you're doing sort of really fast-paced music, right, and you're automating things, is a tenth of a second enough? So a tenth of a second would be 100 milliseconds, okay? A little bit more legit there. If you've got sort of very slow-paced kind of things, maybe 250 milliseconds. That might be a little bit much, right? Because that's a quarter of a second. You can do a couple of moves in that quarter of a second. So I'll generally keep this at around 100 and then see what happens, right? And if it's not enough keyframes generated, you can back this off. And I would say anywhere from sort of 50 to 100 is probably where you want to be if you want to thin out the keyframes. Now, here's another good practice. The default is to have this off. So automate something first, and in fact, maybe we'll do that, and then turn this on and then see what the difference is. And you will see that it's far fewer keyframes and just much easier to work with, okay? So we'll leave this off for the start. All right, and then large volume adjustment, 6 dB, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so that's all of our configurations here. Okay, all right. So now we're back. Hey there, Lemolio, how are you doing? So now that we're back in the timeline, let's actually automate some things. Now, the reason that I'm doing this to show you the differences between Premiere and Audition is that there are some significant fundamental differences in the way that the automation happens, or I should say, the flow of the automation. Because when you're actually dynamically creating automation, by that I mean, drawing or moving faders in real time, the fader is nice and long, the fader is nice and big. You got a lot of space here to do this, and we can automate these fader changes. This is standard whether you're working in 5.1 or stereo or mono. But when you're creating your multi-channel, all of the work that you're doing is contained in this little box right here. So right there, it's just a little confined, all right? It's still effective. It still can be done very easily. It's just a bit compressed, okay? So maybe one of the first things we want to do is sort of work with some of the ambient sounds. Now again, maybe we don't automate these or make them move necessarily. We just want to we just want to create kind of that bigger, larger, surrounded kind of feeling. And it's nice because we've got storms, ambience. So this is actually where we can take some of these sounds and do something really cool with them. So let's just take a listen to these and see actually what we have. I'm going to make these tracks a little bit bigger. Let me zoom up here. I'm going to change my view a little bit. I'm also going to color these 4 audio tracks. Let's label these iris. Okay, so we'll put these in this kind of lightish blue hue. Okay, so let's just take a listen to this ambience for a second here. Okay. Okay. And right now you can see that the puck, okay, is dead in the center. So that means that it's equally feeding the front, left, and right, but also the left and right surround channels. And you can see that on the meters here. Okay, you can see that it's going everywhere except the center and sub, because in Premiere, of course, that's what these 2 controls represent here. Your center channel percentage, discrete, and then your LFE, discrete, okay? So you've got discrete control over both of those. This sound isn't continuous enough, so we're not going to worry about that right now. That one we may actually automate. The storm, however, this one seems to go throughout the entire track. Okay. Turn off our music there. All right. Now you'll notice I've got the lightning, the timed lightning, which is again sound design on other tracks here. All right, let's take a look and watch that again. All right. Okay, so the lightning is happening on another track, and we've also got kind of this wispy wind. All right. So the storm, maybe we want that in all channels, or maybe not. Well, again, one of the things that we can do, let's go ahead and play this back, and I want you to pay attention to the meters. Now, we're not automating just yet. I'm just letting you watch the meters here. If I click and move this around and put it more towards the front, can you see now there's virtually nothing going to the rear surround channels? And as I continue to move this, I'm sending more and more of this to the rear channels, okay? Now, you're not hearing it, of course, because we're only broadcasting the front, left, and right stereo here through Premiere at the moment. Okay, so you can really control where this is all going. Now, because this is continuous sound, I think it's legit to have this playing in all speakers all the time. Front, left, and right, left surround, right surround. So if I want to reset the position of this little button that you see right here, if I just double click that, it's going to reset that puck into the center of the interface, all right? So we've got now the storm, and let's just go ahead and label this track here. I didn't take the track names when I sent it back over. We'll keep the storm in the front, left, and right. Okay? Now, for this creepy ambient sound, let's take a listen to this one here. By the way, I'm just going to pump these up for a bit so we can hear them better, since these are obviously a bit quieter. Okay, now something like that. Maybe we want that one to actually kind of move. So maybe we'll have that go a little bit more left to right. It's also pretty short. Okay, or maybe we want it focused a little more towards the rear channels. Okay, and then this next section here, okay, maybe we want that to move around. So this might be one where we actually do some automation. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to wind back here, and we're going to go into write mode. Now, I've shown you this briefly in Audition before. Again, these are different automation modes. They, Legacy of Pi Michael is an acting god, yes indeed. These function exactly the same way. So if I go into the write mode, now this is actively waiting for me to do something. So all I have to do is just hit play, and then anything that I touch on this track will be automated. It'll create keyframes for me. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to wind this back a little bit. And we're just going to do a little bit of subtle movement here. Maybe we'll actually start this a little bit more towards the left and just kind of move it a little to the right as it crosses over this sound effect. Here we go. And we are in right mode. Let's take a listen here. All right. Leave it there and wait till the sound comes in. All right, now I didn't quite get it all there, so I'm going to wind back. And you'll notice that when I stop, it goes into what's called touch mode. Now, this is important because this is actually going to relate to one of those features that I mentioned moments ago. If we go back into preferences here, into audio, this auto match time. So when you're in touch mode, it's going to allow you to make changes to the automation that you just recorded in write mode. But when you let go or you stop making changes, it's going to go back to the automation you already created, right? So it's allowing you to touch and make a change, but then it goes back to the way it was before. That duration from when you stop touching the puck to going back to the setting it was before is the auto match time, okay? Which is set to 1 second. So that means I make a change, and then after I stop, it takes it 1 second to get back to wherever we left it previously. So 1 second is the default. That's kind of a nice sort of ramp. It might be a little too much, so I will often set that to around half a second. And just to kind of showcase what that does, let's play this back again, and I'm going to modify some of this automation here. Let go. And did you see the orb, when I let go, it kind of flipped back to where it was? All right. Notice as I wind this back now, I'm not touching it. The orb is moving by itself. You see that there? I'll zoom in so you can see. All right. Stupid tooltip. All right. So you can see that half a second, that was almost a little too fast, right? So again, the default is 1 second. Depending upon the kind of moves and things you're doing, you may change that. For me, generally half a second, 0.75, 3/4 of a second is usually good. 1 second can sometimes be a little long, all right? But you get the idea. And now, if you look at the metering here, you can actually see how it's adjusting where things are going. Similarly, if we're in touch mode here, I can also have some of it go into the center channel. Okay, very briefly. So we wind back again, pay attention to the center dial here. Here we go, watching it. All right. Now, once you've made those changes, as I was saying a moment ago, we're in touch mode. So now everything that we do, we can modify what we just automated, and it'll always go back to where we left off. Now, if we want to simply continue from here and not remember everything else we did, then we can go into latch mode, and that will do just that. It'll just leave that puck wherever you stop. It's not going to go back to the stuff underneath. Now, when you stop, all the existing keyframes that you had afterwards will still be there. It's just that while you're automating, you're going to leave that puck where it is. So this can often be good if you're wanting to just do kind of a quick little fix and make some kind of destructive change to leave it somewhere. Maybe there's no movement in the surround for quite some time. You might go into latch. Otherwise, touch is usually a preferred method for just kind of making quick tweaks along the way. Often I'll play through an entire track, do the automation, and then in touch mode, just kind of tweak the ins and outs here and there. Now, after you've done that, if you want to be sure that you don't make any changes to the automation itself, you've got this option. If you just right-click on your surround panel here, you can go into Safe During Write mode. Additionally, if you're done with your automation and you simply want it to read, where you can touch the fader, do whatever you want. It makes no change whatsoever. You're going to go back into Read mode. And now it's doing just that. It's simply going to read the keyframed information that you made. You can see it happening right there. All right, here it goes again. Okay, well, I'm not seeing my center channel move. Maybe I didn't click it. And you get the idea. Okay, so this is the totally non-destructive way just to play back all the automation that you created. Now, having said that as well, if you go into off mode, now it's not respecting anything that you did. So it's not playing back the file with automation at all. Now, what that also means is that if you've got your panner left somewhere in the corner, that's where the sound is going, okay? So if you want everything to kind of come back into all speakers, you can just reset it. Now you see everything is evenly kind of in all speakers. Oh, you can see the center. There's the center. Now it's moving. I don't know why we didn't see it a moment ago. Now you're fine. But again, if we wanted to respect all the automation that we made already, go back into read mode, notice everything resets, and now it's going to function exactly as it did. Okay. Monokartoffel. Oh, yes. It is. It's super easy. It's just, for me, for my money and time, this UI is a little small. Now, this is basically it. I mean, there's not much else. Hey, Tarya, how are you doing, Tinty? There's not much else that's really involved here, except the ability to, by keyframe, edit those keyframes and modify the surround information. So here's where now this gets pretty cool and complex, and you can really start to make some interesting things happen. So let's do one more thing here. Let's just actually go to some of the lightning sound effects. I just want to do a little bit of interesting stuff here just for a second. Okay, so we've got that one, and we've also got this one here. Now you see that actually, that lightning, visually it occurs kind of on the front, left, right. So maybe we actually want that to be sort of in the front and rear rights. So I can take this is track 24. All right, and we'll call this lightning. All right. And maybe we actually want that to start off here on the right side. And we're going to go into right mode. Okay. And let's just play a little bit of this back. All right. And then maybe I'll have it trail off into the rears. Oh, and look, that one happens to be on the left side. Damn you, phone. Ah. All right. Okay, so this is where, again, in touch mode, I'm simply going to wind back here. Let me grab this. Let go. Notice it goes back. So let's go ahead and wind these back. Play this again. Right side goes into the rear as it dissipates. Over to the left. And did you see that? All right. I'll just kind of zoom in so you can watch it here. Whoops. Can I get both of these? Yeah, I think so. Let's play it. Watch the puck move. Okay. All right. So you're getting the idea. I mean, this is not... It's just... You're just playing, right? And like I said, you know, I'm a big believer in that less is more. So while those little subtle things, the left and right balance is very nice, and having the lightning kind of... You'll see it in front of you, and then it kind of decays towards the rear. This is a very, very cool technique. And if you add a little bit of reverb on there, and just to, you know, show you we could have done that here, and if you go into reverb, you'll notice that we have surround reverb as well. You can really create a very nice, very wide sounding kind of effect where it pulls you in, right? It's like, because you're moving. So it's kind of a cool technique to have something start in the front, and in the case of weather, sound effects, ambient elements, kind of disappear into the back of your head. And you'll notice all different types of effects and things here. And we're not going to worry about those right now, but that's how you simply add those. Okay. All right. So let me just twirl this back up again. Let's go to our lightning track here. Let's expand this a little bit. Okay. Sup? What's up, Darius? Hey, good to see you. Hey, Admiral Shane, Trippy Tube. Nice to see you. I only have front speaker at the moment, Lemon Leo. Well, yes, it'll be a little bit harder for you to monitor all of this than I imagine. Okay, so down in the track settings here, under Show Keyframes, you'll see that we have a couple of options. Let me zoom up for you here so you can see it. clip keyframes, which is the default, and then you've got track keyframes, volume and mute, and then you have the track panner, which represent the sort of 4 combined left, right, front, rear, center, and sub. So if you turn on left, right, or say front, rear, where we made some changes, now you can actually see all of the keyframes that we generated, okay? And as I was telling you, even though we've got the linear keyframe thinning turned on, we didn't turn on that minimum keyframe time, that minimum keyframe interval. So do you see, just like, look at, oh, I'm sorry, I'm all the way zoomed in here. Let me go ahead and zoom out here. Like, that's, you know, that's not so much. But did we need all of these, like, sort of incremental bits? Really, to go from here to here could have been done in 2 keyframes. Or really, from here to there could have been done in 1 keyframe, right? Or 2 on each to anchor it. So this is where having that setting, let's go back to audio here, minimal time interval thinning. Let's change that. Let's do 150 milliseconds, okay? And let's wind back on this. All right. All right. We're in touch mode here. And I'm going to do the same thing again, but this time with that option enabled to thin out the number of keyframes. Here we go. Grab it. Okay. And stop and look at the difference. You see the difference? So this was before without the minimal time interval enabled, and this is after. So now you can actually see, like, oh, okay, it's like 10 keyframes. Now that's still, for my money, that's still too many, right? But you see what it did. It thinned out because you don't need so many. So what did I tell you? 200. That's kind of my general default setting there. 250. It might make sense to go to 200. Right? It just makes it easier to animate, to edit, and modify over time. And then once you're doing that, of course, you know, all of your options here, you can Bezier these keyframes. It works just as it does with all the other keyframes in Premiere Pro. There's no magic to this whatsoever. The process of automating these things is the same. Similarly, if we go into Track Panner, front, left, and right, you can see I made, now again, like, look at, this was without that thinning turned on. It did this weird sort of thing here. I don't know, why do we even need this? You know, so we can just right click here and get rid of that keyframe, get rid of that one here. It just created too many. It was too sensitive to my movements. All right, so you can just kind of move that down or simply delete it altogether. Okay, so that simple option there really kind of improves the automation experience. Now, once you've done this, and again, as I said, for certain elements, like for instance, the lightning, you know, this very track right here. Whoops, sorry. Oh, wait a minute. See, now, by the way, remember we're in touch mode, so it just captured that muting while I was playing back. I didn't want it to mute there at all, so that's a mistake. So again, we can just go into, this is where I will actually go into right here. I'm going to overwrite that movement so that it stays unmuted. Okay. We're going to redo these keyframes now that it's better. Okay, like that. Okay. Maybe it goes to the rear like that. Okay, now you can see, look at that. Look at how much more nice that is. So many fewer keyframes, so much easier to edit and modify after the fact. Okay. You might also want to send some of this to the LFE. So, you know, we could simply, if we go into like latch mode here, I might send some of that to the low frequency effects as well. Because there's some nice low end in that thunder. All right, something like that. Now, of course, because I was in latch, see it's staying down there. So bouncing around, okay? So, again, now we've got discrete information going to the low frequency effects. Oh, we've got 10 more minutes. All right, we have to get into Audition. So we can do this for all of our tracks. We can start automating, moving things around. Again, if we want to have something go discretely to one specific place, you can stick this directly in the front right. Oh, sorry, let me get out of this latch mode here. I'm just going to read. We can stick this into front left, or if we want this to go only to discretely to the left surround or only to the right surround, we can do that as well. This is going to allow us to put it into the center, okay? So you can anchor things there, you can automate them, but how do we get it out? Well, in Premiere Pro, if we were actually sort of creating sort of a Blu-ray, DVD, or creating a 5.1 soundtrack that would be used in other places, we've got the option here. Hey, Paulina. Trippy Tube. Well, thank you very much. That's very nice. Yes, trying to make it, I mean, that's the thing. It's really not very difficult. It's just having a good environment to mix it in and then understanding a couple of these simple parameters. Depending upon what format you're going to, you're going to have lots of different audio options. One of them now, in this case, if I'm making an H.264, if I was going to, you know, if we're going to Blu-ray, we could do our H.264 Blu-ray. Under audio here, you'll see that we've got the Dolby Digital options. And then you've got your audio codec, Blu-ray compliant, primary stream, secondary audio stream. And then what you're going to see in here are all the various options for creating that multi-channel 5.1 audio mix that will accompany your video. So this is where you do that directly inside the media encoder. It's going to give you all the various options, various bit rates and things. You're going to notice, however, there's a couple of limitations, specifically with some of the bit rates, okay? Now, this is interesting because, of course, we have Dolby Digital also supported in Audition as well, all right? And you can see there's Dolby Digital Plus as well as Dolby Digital. So this is AC3, the original Dolby Digital. Dolby Digital Plus is EC3, okay? So this is the newer, shinier version of Dolby Digital, also now included in Premiere Pro, where you can see that you basically have much higher bit rates, which is just going to give you better sound quality overall when delivering this. It's also just a more modern, updated version of the codec. You still have all of the export settings here. Now, unfortunately, for export, we could spend a whole episode on export. There's a lot of things that you want to adjust here, so that you ensure proper multi-channel playback. You've got your various channel configurations. By default, you'll probably choose what it selects as the default here for the channel configuration. It knows what we're working in. You've got settings here like dialogue normalization, which is not uncommon. Again, this is just using kind of the default settings. You're enabling LFE, or those low frequency effects channels. You've got for your bitstream mode, again, these are some of the standard Dolby presets for bitstream delivery. And this is something which you can actually look up. Depending upon where this is going and to whom you're delivering, you might have to modify some of these settings here, okay? Dolby Digital Surround EX mode, if any of you remember the sort of Dolby EX, you can still find that in a lot of playout systems. Stereo down mix, okay? Again, here's where you can determine, based on the settings here, the type of down mix that's used. Now, many of you may have receivers that still support Pro Logic and Pro Logic 2. Here's where you can make all of those various settings. Your channel attenuations for down mix, these are all standards, but you can, again, set them and adjust them based on the drop downs here. DC high pass filtering, LFE low pass, 90-degree phase shift. These are all standards for pre-processing. These are enabled by default. Generally, you probably won't have to change most of these. But again, this is where, so you create your 5.1, now you've got to play it back or watch it on something commercial like your Blu-ray player or some other digital player. You know, you could play back the file itself through your machine, through your computer, and view it on the 5.1 system through a television via HDMI or whatever. You want to listen to hear what's happening, and here's where you can make those changes. But if you're given a certain set of parameters, here's where you edit and modify those. Okay? So you export through the media encoder, and again, this is going to create that AC3 or EC3 file for you. Now, having said all of that, let's go into Audition in our last 5 or 10 minutes. Probably going to go about 10 minutes over on this one. Call this Surround 01, okay? So that's surround mixing in Premiere. Now, what if I want to do this in Audition? Because I'm a big believer in doing audio in the application where audio is the focus. Not that you can't do it here. We just did it. It's very effective. It's fun. I screwed up a little my automation at the end there. It works basically exactly the same in Audition. You just have more room, and you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to actually send all of this back to Audition as stems and everything else via dynamic link. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll render audio clip effects. Now we're going to leave that off. Send keyframe clip volume keyframe metadata. Okay, we can keep some of that, or we can disable that if we don't want to send any non-destructive modified keyframe metadata over to Audition, and then we just want to open everything over there. Okay, so let's click OK and send that over with all of its stems and everything else. Okay. So you'll notice that it sends everything over. And by the way, because the Premiere sequence is multi-channel, so is the Audition sequence. How do we know? Well, without even doing anything, if you just look at the meters, you can see here that we've got this multi-channel metering scenario here. Where currently in Audition, everything is just going to the front, left, and right. It doesn't, by default, send everything to the surround channels, okay? So here we are inside of Audition, and you'll see the surround panners on each of our channels. And you might be thinking at first glance, oh, that's even smaller than Premiere. Why the heck would I want to do it in here? Well, actually it's not. Because, let's go back over to our Lightning, for instance. See this little surround panner here? If you double click on that, it actually pulls up this panel. So here you have, excuse me, a much larger, bigger, beefier interface to work in, okay? And you can actually see visually as well exactly where all of your sound is going. So as I said, by default, the positioning is here, where it's sending basically everything to the left and right. A couple of other changes that you'll notice. The center channel percentage here, by default, is set to 100. LFE is always set to 0. That's sort of consistent between the two applications. But the key differentiator is that you just have a much larger area to work with, okay? So it's really a matter of preference. As far as the automation itself goes, again, you've got the same methods here: read, write, latch, touch. And the way that you edit them, again, very much the same. Now, just to kind of show you in terms of just real estate and space, let me go to that lightning setting. I'm actually going to take this track panel here. We can actually make this, let's undock it. We can float this panel. Float this panel, yeah. Okay. And let's put our video back on over here. So remember that our video is coming to us, oh, it seems to be a little delayed at the moment, non-destructively via dynamic link from Premiere. Okay. So we can again kind of drop the volume there. All right. Very cool. All right, so same thing, you know, we could go into our automation lanes here. And when we go into show envelopes, notice I twirled down this little triangle down here under read. You've got show envelopes. It's going to be you're going to be able to see all of the various parameters that you can automate. And of course here, it's going to contain the angle, the radius, the center, the LFE, the stereo spread, and then of course all the other parameters that are on the tracks themselves. Your track EQ, input, output, mix, and power. And then if you add additional effects, everything is automatable. Everything can be automated. So if we were to create keyframes here in the same kind of way, you know, again, we can write some of our information. Oh, and by the way, it's also worth pointing out. Let's go into, I wonder, is it in the multi-track here? Now I have to remember where the auto match setting is. Oh yes, it is. Good first guess. Under Preferences Multitrack, as promised, Keyframe Automation, Auto Match Optimizations. So notice the auto match time, same exact setting. Default is 1 second. Linear edit point thinning, on by default. Minimum time interval thinning. Now I don't know if this is on by default or not. I may have enabled this already. But 200 milliseconds is the setting there. So this is the exact same thing that we just saw in Premiere, which is under Preferences, Audio, right? Again, now can you see why I said I don't know why auto match is up at the top? It just doesn't belong here. In fact, these two things, mix down type and auto match, really should be towards the bottom down here. But here's your linear keyframe thinning, minimum time interval thinning. Okay, so exactly the same settings for your automation. Works the same, functions the same. Very useful and good to know where those things are. And, you know, as I said, you know, just having this ability and really to be able to see visually where all of this stuff is going is so much nicer. Okay. And you can see I just created my automation there. All right. Now, again, if we go ahead and turn on show envelopes, notice now Audition also tells you, you've modified the angle and the radius. So it tells you what part of the surround panner you've automated so that you can keyframe or modify specific keyframes for that automation. So if we went to pan angle, for instance, there's our keyframes for pan angle. And we can actually scrub through this and see exactly what it's doing. Similarly, come over here, radius. Okay, notice now we've got them overlaid so you can see what's happening. Similarly, if we wanted to increase a little bit of that LFE, and notice it goes into touch mode, of course. Send a bunch of that to the LFE. Wait for the next one. Do the same thing again. Okay. What I like about this is if you look down at the meters, and this is where I sometimes like to make these a little bit bigger. Let's show envelopes for our LFE as well. Okay, you can see how I increase the LFE here. Dropped it down, ramped it up again. Notice minimal amounts of keyframes. That's that minimum time interval setting. So freaking essential. So good. That should be on by default. And by the way, this is the 200 millisecond one. Notice it's like, what is that? They got like 6 keyframes on the left, on the right one, and about 10 on the right on the. You see what I'm saying here? 10 and 6 respectively. So much easier because now I can really control these, right? When you had 100 of these with that option disabled in Premiere, it was just too hard to modify them and to edit them. And you can see all of this moving. You can also really get a good idea visually, right, of what's happening. Okay? See how much of that is going to all of these channels. And this really just makes the process of automating the surround just that much easier and that much fun. That much more fun, right? I love having this panel. I love being able to see exactly how much signal is going to all of these channels. And if you've got your speakers set up as you're auditioning this, you're going to find that this visual is very, very accurate. It's actually very indicative of exactly what you're hearing. So, like I said, there's no reason why you can't do it here, right? The problem is you're confined to this little space and you don't really have any visual feedback of the bleed, right? Of how much, you know, just because you're 50% towards the front left, there's still signal going to the rear right. It just is very minimal. You can't see that here. Whereas in Audition, if I take, let's just take another track here. Let's go to our Storm track. All right, so we're on the Storm. If I take my, I like to call it the orb. I don't like that puck. And this isn't really a dish either, so I like the orb. This now really shows you exactly how much signal. Notice the white lines here. They're representing kind of what remains, right? So you can see, even when I'm all the way over here on right surround, there's still a little bit, just a tiny bit, that's going into the left, all right? Now, if we were to scroll up here and just to kind of show you one more thing. Let's see, we're at 10:04. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. We're just about done. I think these are the Something's Happening voices. Let's just take a listen. Okay, so those are in front left and front right now. Again, I could have those discreetly go into the center simply by enabling the center here, and I can actually just turn on the center channel. Let's wind this back. So that there's just a little bit of bleed. But you can see that primarily all of that info is going into our center channel there. Okay. All right. And again, continue to kind of move these around and have it wherever you want. For dialogue, you are generally going to have, you know, everything kind of discreetly in the center, but it doesn't mean it has to go there. It's just a matter of how much of it do you want going there, okay? And you've got complete control over that with your sliders and your pan position and orb inside the surround panner here. Okay, so that got a little messed up. All right, now let's go ahead and export. So as I mentioned before, same concept here. We can do our mix down. We can go into multi-track mix down. We can do our entire session. And then we've got a couple of different options. So now the default option is going to be to create a multi-channel 5.1 interleaved file, okay? So that is one self-contained mixed file that contains all of the elements, which you can drop into Premiere, or you can drop into a DVD or Blu-ray authoring software, something like Encore or something else for those of you still making DVDs. Yeah, Michael's face is so classic, right? Hey, TC, how are you doing? The orb. You can, of course, change that as well, and it doesn't have to be 32-bit. You probably make a 48K 24-bit file, all right? Under sample type in here, again, you can kind of adjust some of those things. If you wanted to downsample it, if we were going to go to 24-bit or something to 16, I would probably recommend using our dither here. The other option, though, is if we were going to send this back to Premiere, just like you saw before, naturally we have the option to create stems. Now, we don't want individual stems here necessarily, but we could if we wanted to. We, of course, also have the option to create mono, stereo, or 5.1, or all three of them directly, and this will, of course, create the interleaved file. But the cooler thing is, now, as part of one of the new features of the latest version of Adobe Audition CC, you actually have the ability to export the video with your finalized surround mix without the need to go back to Premiere Pro directly from Audition. So I can choose Export with Adobe Media Encoder. And when I choose that now, come over here, it's waiting for the Media Encoder, give it a second, all right? And let's go into something like our H.264 Blu-ray. All right, we can choose our particular preset here, something like that. Okay, we can modify our channel configurations here, all right? Or if we were to go into something like, let's just say we just want to do, let's try one of our, let's go into Wave here. All right, and change these. Again, here's your routing matrix. This is all seeing this as stereo. Why is this seeing this as stereo? I don't want stereo. Okay, let's go into H.264. All right. Oh, and I wonder if I have to make, I don't know that any of these presets here are actually already made for multi-channel output. So this might be where you want to create, now that I'm looking at this, having not done that till now, you may want to create a preset for yourself that already has the multi-channel output pre-configured, because I'm looking here, these are already pre-configured for stereo. Okay, so yeah, so your preset may or may not be the most ideal in this particular instance. So let me go back to Mixdown, and under our file format here, let's instead choose Dolby Digital. Okay, so go to Dolby Digital, go into Change here, and now these are all the same settings that you saw directly in Premiere when we were in the Media Encoder. This is just the same thing, just embedded here in this separate dialog. You'll see you've got your codec mode, Dolby Digital Plus here, your various channel configurations. Notice it's even choosing the same defaults here. Your data rate, no, you don't want this at 192. That's the lowest possible. You probably crank this up to 1024 or at a minimum 640. Notice your dialog normalization, your pre-processing, all of these other settings are exactly the same ones that I just showed you in Premiere. So this just allows you to create a separate, independent, in this case, EC3 file, as opposed to AC3, okay, EC3 indicating Dolby Digital Plus, without the video component. So this is just if you wanted to do a discrete surround mix here, okay? Same settings, same process, still Dolby Digital. A lot of people ask me if you want to do DTS exports. There are DTS codecs that you can download that can be used for export in Audition, and a lot of times you may actually wind up needing to deliver 5.1's worth of stems. In other words, 6 channels of stems that represent left front, right front, LFE, center, left surround, right surround. Just it depends on the authoring program that you'll be using. But you have those options available to you. Okay? So, my friends, that kind of wraps up this semi-brief look at multi-channel surround mixing between Premiere Pro and Audition. Okay. By the way, if you'll notice when I play this back, we're playing this at 1/4 resolution. That's why this is looking a bit pixelated and scaly, because it's dynamically streaming this directly into Audition. It functions very much like the Mercury playback, fractional playback settings here in Premiere as well. Same concept. It just allows you to play that and stream that, because everything that's on these clips, there's Lumetri effects, there's dynamically linked After Effects comps, animated text, there's overlays and other effects. All of that stuff is being dynamically linked over. And you'll see when you stop or pause, it goes back into sort of full res, full quality there. Okay, excellent. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to transition over. So thank you for watching this Audio 101. If you've got more questions about this or want to know more about audio or more suggestions for future episodes, follow me here on twitch.tv/Beetlejace. And drop me a line, drop me a whisper. Let me know what you want to see, what you want to hear. You can also find links to all of my properties for YouTube, and Vimeo, and Spotify, and everything else right there on my Twitch page. So stick around. We're just going to stop the stream here. I'm going to restart it, 10 seconds, and we'll continue with editing and mixing and possibly some recording as well in Audition and Premiere Pro for one of my older tunes that we're going to eventually deliver to YouTube. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Stick around. Don't change that channel. You may need to refresh your device. See you momentarily.